What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Collision Live. Daniel here, and joined at the desk by the masterwork painting of Renaissance art to my messy scribbles my mom used to pin on the fridge, Mr. Samuel David Camp. What is up?
Oh, not too much, but which one, did your mom care more about? Would she prefer a Picasso, or did she really want your painting?
Let's just say my mom, she loved me, but she never encouraged me to follow artistic dreams or potential. I think she saw that there was lacking in that department. But hopefully what we're not lacking on this show is interesting stuff to talk about, like we do every week here at the Collision Live. A lot of cultural issues, kind of general topics, just things as Christians trying to approach culture, engage with culture, talk about culture, argue about culture, all that fun stuff. But how's it going this week? Anything fun going on?
It's been good. We just celebrated all the moms out there this past weekend, so that was nice. I got to see my mom, which was wonderful, and it was a really good weekend for sure.
Turns out moms are pretty cool.
Yeah.
Moms do a lot of cool stuff. Moms keep kids on the straight and narrow when those kids have fathers like me and Sam.
That's true.
But we had some interesting stuff we want to talk about this week. There was something that just kind of popped up. Thank you, Facebook or Twitter algorithm that just always
knows what you're thinking.
Always knows what I want to see. And this thing popped up on my feed the other day, and I thought we should just real briefly, we don't need to go deep into this, but just because this sort of ties into some of the stuff we've talked about in recent weeks about just sort of, the way that we, because of like visual movies and pictures, and how we think about like Noah's Ark, and it's like this kid's story. So this is the Flood board game. So this thing popped up. I don't know anything about, I've never played the Flood board game. I think it's still on like Kickstarter, so I don't even know if it's like out yet. But this thing just sort of amused me that, nothing says fun family night like God's wrath and judgment on all of humanity. Even like this description, if you're watching the live stream version of our show, it says, build your huts and camps, gather resources. And like, I don't know, maybe I haven't read Genesis for a while, but I don't think building huts and camps is necessarily the best approach to this. Would you play the Flood?
Yeah, maybe I would be struck with lightning if I did, but or maybe this is very unchristian of me, but that seems really like it would be a fun game to play. I don't know, is it like who can build their ark the fastest? What tribe is gonna float away?
Yeah,
before the rains, come down in a deluge, but I don't know.
Kids are like weeping because they didn't finish their arc in time, and now they're going to be flooded and
it's like is it like an apocalyptic board game version of the Oregon Trail? It's sort of
and even like I was reading some reviews from like the beta of this, and you can get like cards, you can get like the sin card, and like the card every like 7-year-old wants to pull. I got sin. I don't know. I think these things amuse me. Again, this might be the funnest board game that was ever invented. But I know we've talked about before on the Collision Live. Like I forget what it was called. There's like that like Christian like kind of escape room game, and like I don't know. Whenever we sort of take these biblical narratives and kind of try and like I think I own Bibleopoly. This. Combining the biblical stuff, I think it's weird, but I don't know. The Flood is not necessarily the narrative of the Bible that I would choose for family game night. But hey, if you're playing the Flood, let us know if it's a fun game, and if you make it onto the ark, or if you're one of the unfortunate souls that unfortunately did not.
One of the lost tribes.
But moving on to the first segment of our show, like we always do here at the Collision Live, we got pop culture news. So we dropped the ball last week. We failed turn in our geekdom card. Now that we missed the opportunity to touch into Star Wars Day, May the 4th, which hit just the day after we had our last live stream. But there was some news that came from that stuff that, as a Star Wars fan, excited about. Probably the biggest one, Kenobi, the upcoming Disney Plus show, released its kind of first full-length, I guess, trailer. More footage for this thing, which comes out in a couple weeks. And this thing continues to look awesome. I'm super excited for this. In more Star Wars news, it was just announced, I think yesterday, the Ahsoka show, that kind of the next Disney Star Wars show that was just put into production. I don't know when this thing's going to air, but again, looking forward to that. And another news which seems to also be a trend happening in culture. Dave Chappelle was attacked on stage at a comedy show. I don't know all the jokes for this, what all the details for this, but someone apparently didn't like his humor, rushed on stage, tried to attack him. lot of stuff to unpack with that. Avatar, another story. I think I mentioned that this was coming out, but I've seen it now. The first trailer for Avatar, The Way of Water. This thing played before the Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness movie. Probably a more enjoyable experience than the movie. But this thing looks great. I'm quite excited for this. But something I am definitely excited for, Rings of Power. You guys know I'm a Lord of the Rings nerd geek. I am so excited for the show coming out in September. Well, they just brought, I feel a little left out that I wasn't included in this, but they brought a bunch of sort of super Tolkien fans from across the internet and, podcasts and all that kind of stuff, and like scholars and all those people. They brought them out to Oxford to meet the showrunners and kind of show a bit of the footage and the initial vibes for this thing. They can't do reviews yet. Was this off the charts? Everyone's super excited about this. I know a lot of them were kind of going in skeptical because as Tolkien fans, we can get a little uptight about our Tolkien. So again, I'm super excited for this. But probably the biggest story that out in pop culture this week, Bite Coke. Coke just announced they're releasing a new flavor. Apparently, this is Coke that tastes like pixels. So if that's something an experience you've been wanting to have, now is your opportunity to taste pixels. But that's all we got this week in pop culture news. So Sam, what would you say pixels taste like?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm getting the head shake from Joni in the back there. I think it probably tastes like whatever Coke decides it tastes like. You know, the great benefit of what we call first mover advantage. If you release a beverage that you claim tastes like pixels, who is anyone else to disagree?
I'm sure
having never tasted pixels myself.
I'm sure there'll be some thought piece on the internet with some guy that's not what pixels really taste like. Some computer nerd that somehow can find an algorithm.
Technically, if you computed the quantum distance of, anyways.
But I will absolutely try Pixel Coke. I know
that'll go with your theme from your last host corner. Like we'll have maybe a comparison when the Pixel drink comes out. Like which is better, original Coke or Pixel Coke?
Do you have your canned vegetables with a side of Pixel Coke? That is the meal of champions. Anything else on this kind of pop culture news?
Yeah, I mean, there's I feel like a lot. I mean, obviously, super stoked about the new Kenobi. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. Disheartening about Dave Chappelle. He made it out fine. The guy that attacked him,
not so much.
Definitely did not. I guess one interesting follow-up to that is I guess the district attorney of LA is not pressing charges against the guy who committed a felony in front of a live audience and on camera. So that's kind of troubling and interesting. But and then Avatar. I need to maybe go back and watch the original Avatar because I don't.
It is better than people give it credit for. People just hate on this movie. I think this kid is popular and
because I don't really remember I don't remember other than the blue people and the pretty landscapes. I really don't remember the plot.
That's pretty much what Avatar is. You go for the pretty
for the visuals,
landscapes and the blue people. But Rings of Power is the one I'm excited for.
Obviously.
People have been very skeptical about. I love the trailer. A lot of Tolkien people didn't because they're all worried there's mess with this character at that time period really didn't have this kind of hair and we get really uptight about that, but people are excited about that. But hey, let us know anything going on this week in pop culture that you guys are excited about.
Yeah.
And there's always seems to be stuff that, hey, we talk about bad stuff in pop culture, but we also celebrate stuff that we like because pop culture is fun. But one of the things that is sort of becoming a trend in pop culture is the multiverse. Let's segue into our first segment of our show. So this sort of concept's become, I don't really know what started it, but it's become this new trend. Everyone wants to go explore the multiverse. Obviously, the main example, the new Doctor Strange movie, which dropped on Friday. Last Friday, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness.
Madness it was.
And it was mad. Check out the review if you want to see more mad. But Spider-Man, the most recent Spider-Man, No Way Home, kind of dabbled in the multiverse with all the different Spider-Mans. The upcoming Flash, if that thing ever comes out and the actor gets his act together, kind of dealing with the multiverse. A new movie that I haven't seen, but I've seen nothing but a crazy good buzz. The Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is just a fantastic movie title. Marvel, What If, sort of all over the place. This idea of the multiverse and being able to explore alternative selves and meet ourselves, but we're different and the world's different. And it just seems like we've sort of, as a culture, kind of grasped onto this concept. So I thought we could just talk about both this as a concept in movies, what we think about that, but also just sort of, why people are so intrigued by this, and maybe kind of as a Christian, what do we do with a concept like the multiverse? But does the multiverse, does this concept excite you? Do you care?
I mean, I think in some ways it does. And we were talking before we went live more about shows that deal with like parallel universes, which I think is a way more, you can get your head around it, and I think lends itself to be far more interesting kind of in the long run. But I don't know. I think I would credit like Marvel with maybe doing the multiverse thing first. And also like, I think it's probably just an outworking of like, you have all these superheroes, and I feel like they've just been slowly like collaborating. And then so like, I feel like a multiverse kind of thing, somewhat inevitable, that like you have all these different,
and it's convenient because that's sort of what they do with
and
like
it sells, and it's like, oh well, wouldn't you love to see this superhero team up with this superhero?
And it's like, if you want to make like a Batman or something that's like not the one that's current, then it's like, this is Batman but in the multiverse, or like
well, it becomes this sort of like umbrella that you can just kind of throw all these characters in and just kind of do sort of whatever you want to with. And so I mean, I think it's somewhat interesting, but the shortcoming of it, or the difficulty with it, is probably the runtime of a movie and the amount of stuff that you try and like cram into it. You never really get to suss out like the finer points and sort of pull at threads in any real meaningful way. It just kind of ends up being madness. And so I think it's interesting, and I think there's a lot you could do with it. And I think the trouble is sort of paring down, these producers and directors, like, okay, let's try and focus the multiverse a little bit, if that's a sort of thing.
Like limitations in art, and not a bad thing. We think of them as a bad thing. I think it actually helps for storytelling to have parameters and not
makes it better.
Because I'm maybe a little less positive. I think I don't like the multiverse concept. I think maybe some expressions of it can be good, but for the most part, I think narratively, it's just not it's like a fun thought experiment, but it doesn't tell interesting stories. And I don't want to give spoilers for the review for Doctor Strange if you haven't seen it, but for movies like that, like I think the multiverse sort of removes a lot of like stakes, because you're dealing with like reality, but it's not our reality. And I don't care about these characters. If they die, it's like, well, our version of that person didn't die. So like,
right. I think that's the real weak point, rather than, because I think, probably the best TV show ever made, and maybe I'll make that point in a host corner one day, but Fringe, which is a TV show produced by J.J. Abrams.
Criminal, or like way underrated.
Yeah, like super underrated, probably the best television, like peak television. And it deals with parallel universes. And it's a TV show, right? So it's, I don't know, like 6 or 7 seasons. That, I think, is a way better format to sort of explore these, like, counterfactuals and that kind of stuff, rather than a multi-universe. And it's also in a TV format. So, like, you don't have to cram it all into, like, a 2-hour or 2.5-hour runtime. And you're way more invested in the characters. You're more invested in the plot, because it's way more, like, constrained to, like, these two universes are, like, on a collision course, or what you do here is going to affect what happens in the parallel one. And so the stakes, I think, are just naturally higher. And so you're more invested in like what's happening, rather than just like, oh, there's 18 bajillion ones. And it's like, hey, we're kind of bouncing around and nothing ever really happens. And it just kind of seems pointless.
Yeah. Kind of the emotional attachment and stakes. If it's just, there's a million versions of this person, and like, it's terrible that we lost one of them, but hey, we still got 3 other Captain Americas or whatever. But kind of like you were saying, though, I do think and this is what I said in my in even my review of Doctor Strange, is like, narratively, I find the multiverse is not an interesting I think it's not good for story. It's just sort of all this theoretical stuff that it takes away from the characters. But I think like kind of thematically, like some of the stuff you can do with that is interesting, because I think like, at the baseline, like the multiverse is kind of like a metaphor just for, like, even like in Doctor Strange, sort of one of the mechanics of how it works is like dreams are like glimpses into like other versions of yourself, like the multiverse. And like, so it's even a little more like on the nose of like the metaphor of like the multiverse is sort of our way to like
escape.
to escape, or like think about like, what would my life have been, had I not done this, or had I actually studied in college, or like, all these sort of things, or hadn't broken up that relationship, or whatever it is, like, I think the multiverse in that
I
sense,
turned left instead of right coming into my morning commute.
So yeah, had I not got the day wrong on my final exam in my third year of college,
Which I think that is at the base, and I think that's what appeals to everybody about these like sort of themes and these ideas is like, well, so what if, right? And I guess Marvel has a thing called what if. But I think that's the point. I think that everybody kind of latches onto and is curious about. And I think if you're only human if you think, well, what if had I just done this or left 5 minutes early. I think you typically think this like if you get in a car wreck or something, and it's like, had I just like gotten out the door at the right time, or what if I had just done X, Y, or Z, then this outcome would have been very different. And so I think maybe the sort of mass appeal of the multiverse in theory, and in sort of theme, but in practicality, it ends up being just super jumbled to try and like portray that on screen in a movie.
Yeah, and even like a midlife crisis is basically like, looking into your other version in the multiverse, and had I just bought that motorcycle instead of settling down and have a family, or whatever it is, like, just sort of imagining different things. I do think, like, as Christians, there is stuff with the multiverse that I think is interesting, like thematically, and I think like, I don't think it's like an anti-Christian should be against the multiverse. I think there's value in kind of wrestling with that, and even just seeing like the impact of like choices, like for good or bad. Yeah. That like, this small decision here, like had we made a different choice and not done that, like that kind of ripples out throughout history, and like in that's sort of the positive sense. I think in the maybe the negative sense is this, and that's sort of like even the positive message of the Doctor Strange movie is like just sort of that lack of like contentment. Like I feel like part of the multiverse is just sort of like, hey, here's a different future, or like universe of myself where I can have a better future, or like, hey, I had some past, some pain in my past. Like here's a version of me where I wouldn't have to experience. Sort of like that grass is greener. If only I could be that version of myself and not deal with that.
Well, it's wishful thinking, right? Like that's sort of, at bottom, it's like, I just wish that this had been different, or that had been different, or I had done this instead. And I think that, I think it is a matter of contentment and being okay with who you are and where you are.
Yeah, because this is a verse that kind of came to mind, or a couple of verses that came to mind that kind of tethered into Ecclesiastes 3:11. It says, "He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from the beginning to the end. I know that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is a gift from God. I know that everything God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it. Nothing can be taken away from it." As that verse sort of came to mind, this is sort of like there is like struggles and like toils and tribulations and stuff, but like that is just part of like the story and like the life God has given us. Like there is kind of beauty in that. I think some like the multiverse, and again, that ends up being some like the plot of some of these stories. It's like, don't mess with the multiverse. Like, you have to embrace it.
Well, isn't that the whole, the Loki show?
Oh yeah, that's sort of another.
It was like the timeline, or like the sacred timeline or whatever. And it's like, oh, somebody's like deviating from the sacred timeline, and you have to like go out and like put them back, to the right timeline or whatever, or exterminate them or whatever they do. But yeah, it's like, don't mess with like the right timeline, and then you have all these deviations from that.
Kind of like if we tend to just like pull from the multiverse or whatever, and like make our life how we want it, like we sort of cease to be who we are, like we're created to be. So I do think as a concept, as a narrative, I think it results in a lot of kind of lame, bad movies. But I think thematically, the multiverse is an interesting thing for Christians to kind of wrestle with and think through, and sort of how that applies to just being content and happy and, hopeful and all that kind of stuff. So let us know if you guys like the multiverse concept, if there's other like examples of that we didn't think of recently, we'd love to hear those too. But something I know you guys would definitely love to hear, I know I am excited to hear it. Our next segment of our show, we have Host Corner.
All right, Daniel. So I know you love art, and so I brought a little show and tell, little art. This is the Olympus Image of the Year Awards for last year, and it's all like microscope imaging, and I think it's amazing because one, you can put up that next image, and this is an Arabidopsis thaliana flower, butchering the Latin form of that, but it's a flower with pollen tubes growing through the pistil. The flower tissues were chemically cleared to become transparent, and then the pollen tubes were stained with this yellow fluorescence in order to be seen. You can see like the yellow like vein things going down through the middle, and they figured out how to take a picture of this, and I think it's just stinking amazing. And I think it kind of points to just sort of the creativity of God and of the universe, that from like, you know, we've seen those like Hubble Space Telescope images of like the universe, and it's amazing, and even down to like the microscopic level, just all these incredible images. You can go, I think it's like olympuslifescience.com or something like that. You just Google it, and you can see a bunch of pictures kind of in this vein of like, here's some, you know, they do some finagling with the subjects, but they get these amazing, compelling images, and I think it's just really cool. And that's it.
Well, I didn't quite catch the name of that plant.
I'll leave a link in the show notes. I'll put it in the description there, so you can read that for yourself.
I do think that it is fascinating, like how much like art, how we can like everything can be. I know like sometimes we think of that in like a negative sense, that like, like a urinal, you know, Duchamp made like a urinal like art, and like, you know, we've destroyed art, but like just like how like artistic and like beautiful like creation is.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, you look down to the cell level, and it's like, it's really amazing, like just architecture of cells and just the teeny tiniest thing. And then also like, you know, you have like mountains and landscapes, and then, you know, stars and universes, and I don't know, it's amazing that like there isn't a dull sort of bit, I guess, of life, from the smallest to the greatest. So I just think it's awesome and super inspiring.
Do you know what else is an inspiring art form? Worship songs, praise songs, an important part of our, the worship experience in church, and also the second topic for our show today. So this was kind of a general topic, not necessarily like based on anything specific. There's always stuff to talk about. There's always controversies and opinions and stuff on worship, even like the so-called like worship wars. I think some of those have sort of ended, or just taken like a new shape.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to talk about this because I mentioned this actually last week. And whatever topic we were with rituals and stuff, we sort of touched on it, but I thought we'd just kind of unpack it a little bit more. So there was an article that my father actually sent me that I thought was interesting. I had was kind of talking about a study that had been done recently. The study was called "Worship at the Speed of Sound," which is a cool title. This is done by Southern Wesleyan University. And this is, I think it was like 32 years of kind of worship songs they were studying, just sort of trends, and like based on like the rights and like licensing and all the stuff, kind of getting like the nitty and gritty of like, you know, how our church is using worship songs. And they came up with some interesting kind of conclusions and findings. And one of the main ones that the article kind of brings out is just like the rapidly like reducing lifespans of these songs. The article says like in the 1990s, a popular song, a worship song, had a lifespan of about a dozen years. It would kind of rise for about 5 years and then it's kind of slowly decline. Where 2 decades later, 20 years later, kind of the average lifespan of like a popular hit worship song is about 3 to 4 years, sometimes even less. So that churches are just kind of more rapidly cycling through a lot more new songs, a lot less like staying power of some of these songs that, you know, you just sing at church, all growing up. And some of this, one of the quotes that I enjoyed from this article says, in a lot of churches, a song has to either be 300 years old or it has to be 3 days old. The middle ground is purgatory. And I think it's true. There's some churches, they're still singing the good stuff that we sang back when my great grandfather was in church, and like, And then like there's other churches, kind of more, I guess maybe more like modern contemporary churches, where it seems like, every new week it's like, we're gonna introduce to you 3 new songs, and we love these songs, and learn the words, but then forget them because you're never gonna sing it again. And it is kind of a balance, and that was sort of the conclusion of this article. Kind of the team doing the study saying, it's good that we're that people are like into worship songs, like that there's so much creativity, so many options and stuff, and good songs being out there, but they were sort of wondering, is there unintended consequences of this sort of everything has to be new? You kind of lose some of these kind of more like traditional or familiar songs, and everything has to be kind of be the next best thing. So I thought we could kind of get into that a bit.
Yeah.
And sort of what is the kind of the state of kind of worship songs? Like, is it a good thing that there's so much? Like, have we lost something? So what do you think? We both play instruments. We've both been on many different worship bands of all different styles.
Yeah.
But any kind of thoughts from this with the?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple of things. I think maybe, and I don't know how much it gets into like the reasons why we have such a shorter attention span. I think we can probably speculate that a lot of that has to do with the internet. But I do think that's probably part of the reason why there are so many more worship songs now. Is like it's worship music. I think, as with many other things, has been somewhat democratized, and so because of the internet, like there's way more people making these songs, and they're getting discovered, and so I think that's not necessarily a bad thing, and I think that can be good, that people can find a greater variety of worship music. But I do think the flip side of that is that worship music is much more at least it feels more like a consumer good now, and much of worship services also feel closer to like a consumer good, and less about actually worshiping, and more just about like getting our church fix or our Jesus fix on Sundays, and it's more about like me, how I feel at that time, and the songs that make me feel good, and less about the actual worship that's taking place.
Yeah, because this is another kind of quote from the article that kind of touches on that, where it says, "Hey, we're glad people are writing worship songs and are eager to sing God's praises, but the team worries about the unintended consequences of turning worship music into a disposable commodity, something that they say reflects the influence of the broader culture on church." And that is sort of like, as I've been kind of thinking about this, it's kind of going back and forth on that. Like on the one side, we have more songs, I think, because technology, like we have more access to songs. There's more people making songs. There's all those positive sides of it. Like kind of the negative, the cynical half of my brain is also kind of wonders, like, is it just sort of this like commercialization of like worship music is like an industry now? Like if you think of like some of the old hymns and stuff, like you have some like old some old pastor that was like leading his church in like rural the States, and like you'd write a hymn for his congregation and they would sing it for the next 20 years, and like it was very like out of for the purpose of the church, like not even always like by musicians. It would be by some of these like church leaders, where now like it is very much like an industry. Like there's it's huge. There's tons of these things being made. There's like the charts. Like I think even just some of the, like they get into the article too, like just some of that, like the charts and like what's popular, like kind of leads to this sense of like, you don't want to miss out on the next big thing. And there's always trying to get ahead of the curve. And I think some of that, like the article says, like does reflect like, I think, bad trends in the culture, even if it's not like the one-to-one.
Well, I think definitely, even for all the, I guess, great things that Christian radio has brought us, it also has, again, sort of commercialized the music that ends up being part of the church. And I think that can be a very detrimental thing for the church, because now you're just sort of chasing the next big thing. And I think it also ties into churches sort of I think panic to be relevant, and I think that is probably borne out a lot in music choices. So I think a church can easily be like, oh well, we don't want to lose the young people, so like we're like checking the charts and like, okay, what are they singing? Like, okay, well let's learn that one, and trying to like maybe use the current popular music as sort of a vector to keep young people in the church, rather than sort of stepping back and looking at it from a bigger picture, and doing those sort of things that can actually keep young people in the church, and not just sort of being somewhat gimmicky with the music, and just kind of throwing a bone to the young people and say, oh, look, we played that last song that you all love and know, and it's just, you get that sort of that tension, you get that feeling that it can be very much like we're just kind of doing this to like appease. And again, it goes back to that. I think we've shifted to a consumerist mindset and model, I think, in a lot of churches today.
Yeah, because I've even caught myself, like, our church will play a song and be like, oh, I haven't heard this song forever. Like, almost like in my mind, it's like, the song was like 700 years old. And like, the reality is, like, it was probably written like 3 years ago. But just the thought of still playing this song that we used to, because we are so used to kind of new stuff. I did look up, again, another verse that came to mind in this is, Psalms 96, where it does say, sing to the Lord a new song, sing to the Lord all the earth. So I don't want to necessarily just be like, get back to those old hymns. We need to, the canon was closed. We don't need new songs. Like, I think, especially as like an artist, a creative person, like, it's good that there's new songs, like, that we're not, that we are like writing songs that are current and that are coming out of like the current body, and not just like, like, I don't think we're required to like still just all sing from like a hymnal and sing these old songs because that's what they used to do, like very traditional. So I do think there is positives to it. But I just think like it's almost like you need, like, a song needs to be in sort of like going back to like our ritual discussion of like, I think a song needs to be in circulation for at least a like somewhat extended period of time, just for the words and stuff to like sink in. Like, there's not just, here's a song, you sang the words because they were on the screen, but like you couldn't really remember them because you haven't sang it very much. And like,
I don't know, but many of the songs today, you probably only need to hear like the chorus once, and you got it. And like, there's like 4 words that they kind of sing over and over and over again, and it's like, okay, cool. Like,
this is
maybe that's a critique of some of the new stuff that comes out.
This is a total side cranky side tangent, but I get a kick out of, like, because like modern worship songs, like the verses are always like super complex, and like they're like deep cuts from like some obscure Old Testament verse, and like they're pulling this terminology, and it's like just tons of words and like these long verses, and like. But then it's almost like they like had a deadline or something, and like of course, God is good. Let's just sing that 6 times, like, and then move on. Like, I don't know, like, it's almost like we have these complicated verses, or like the most simplistic,
God
repetitive.
Is so good.
Yeah, you add that for the final refrain.
Yeah. Oh, I like what he did there with the 2 so's right between the God and good.
And then you come up with one new line for the bridge, and build that up for 3 minutes. But again, I know we make fun of like the repetitive nature of worship songs.
Yeah.
But kind of like our ritual thing, I think some of it is just like, I long for I miss some of the like poetic stuff of some of these old songs where, a little more, it feels like a little more effort went into.
Bring back old Frances Ridley Havergal and have her.
Going to Bahula Land or whatever those old songs were. But I do think the fact that some of these things are repetitive isn't necessarily a bad thing. Like,
no.
I think it can be, but I think there is value in like some of these songs kind of becoming part of like the canon of a church, or things that that unify us. Like these are songs the whole church knows, like everyone can sing, and like we all know the words, and like those have sunk in, rather than just like every couple of weeks there's a new song and it's really good, cool words, but like it doesn't ever become like a part of like the testimony of the church.
Yeah, and I guess that's the thing. I think that's the thing that's so difficult now, because we are so connected, both as sort of like the church at large, like globally and across the country, but also individuals are connected through the internet now. I feel like it becomes harder for like a church to sort of cement their identity and sort of think of themselves as like the local, and I speak of like the local church, like this is our sort of anthem, or this is our song, and this is what God is doing in our church now. And so we're going to sing about this, for many, many weeks at a time or whatever. So I just think there is that tension of like, we always want to be thinking of like, the church as, at large. But I think in doing so, we can kind of miss like, okay, so, but what's happening here locally? and that really should probably be the main concern of the music and of the church. Not to say like, well, we don't care about what God's doing, not to say that at all, but it's the local body and that the local testimony of that church, I think, kind of can fall by the wayside in service of sort of like the global church.
Yeah, because even it's funny. I was my wife and I after we first got married, we moved out to just outside San Francisco, helped start a church plant there, Epic Church. Kind of helped get that church off the ground, and like even like now, like it's been however many years, like 10 years almost since we were a part of that church. Like we'll hear songs like in other churches, like our church, and like my wife always nudged me, like, hey, that's an Epic song. Like that. There was this. No, not that we didn't sing. Like the church would even write songs. It's not like they only sang like a handful of songs, but like there were some songs that like even like years later we can like kind of associate as like that's sort of part of that like epic story, and like it was very relevant to where we were as a church, and like where we were as a San Francisco, like a very kind of godless city, and like some of the stuff like that. And like, I think we do miss some of that, and I don't know the answers. I don't know how you balance like you want to. I think a healthy church and faith and bodies should be producing new art and new songs.
Yeah.
But I don't think that has to necessarily be at expense of like traditional stuff and things that are like repetitive or like rituals or any of that kind of stuff. But let us know maybe some favorite songs. Again, sometimes it can backfire when you get a song that a church becomes part of their story and it's just a bad song that you sort of wish they could just change the story, invent something new.
Yeah.
So there's it's a complicated.
Be careful what song becomes your song.
Yeah, be careful what you wish for, or you could end up with "I am a friend of God" as part of your church worship circulation. But let us know your thoughts on that. How do you like new songs? Do you miss some of the old stuff? Not necessarily just like the old stuff, like the hymns, but just some of the songs maybe you kind of grew up with, or that maybe
Bring
the church
back
was
Gregorian
singing.
chant.
Yeah, we need Gregorian polyphonic chant. But let us know. We'd love to have that discussion with you guys. And just talk about that. But the last segment of our show we have this week at the Collision, several things kind of going on here in the Collision multiverse. Got a couple of reviews. Like I said, the Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. I have a written review for that, as well as a video review.
I get the feeling, Daniel, that maybe you weren't a huge fan of the film.
I wasn't crazy about it. Maybe it seems like I'm more negative. I didn't necessarily hate it the way I've hated some other Marvel movies. I just didn't think it was a very good movie. But I think even my wife, after the movie's like, how on earth are you going to review that? And I said, no. It's the opposite. I love movies like this that have so much to talk about. Even if I didn't like the movie, it makes the review interesting. So there was definitely a lot to talk about. And also a shout out to, we had a review for Father Stu. I don't think we plugged it here on the Collision because I didn't write it. Shout out to Monty who went and saw that movie and wrote a review. So if you haven't checked that, it's only a written version, but check that out. And have a couple articles, if you haven't checked those out, on thecollision.org. One on sort of liberty and entertainment, kind of shifting the discussion. And then our most recent article, Cinematic Jesus, kind of getting into stuff we've got into on the show. And is it helpful or is it harmful to make these like Bible movies? Does it kind of, does it lead us to invent board games on the flood? Or does it help us encounter scripture in a profound new way? So I kind of look at both sides of that discussion. But anything else kind of going on this week for...
No, I think you've covered it all. We're good to go.
I will say we haven't really mentioned it here. We'll mention or unpack it more later. The Collision is moving to a new studio. We'll be sharing some stuff for that. We're excited about that. Get a fancy new space. I'm going to do some new stuff here with the Collision as we keep growing this thing. So stay tuned for that, as things are going to look very different on these videos. But most of all, guys, thanks for joining us. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, do all the stuff that you know to do to just join with what we're doing here, become a collider. But stay safe and continue to collide with your world for Christ.